Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan here with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I have another segment of my interviews with executives of mining companies. Today, I have a special guest in Patty Nicol, who runs Orogen Royalties, and we have a lot to talk about with this company. Patty, thank you very much for joining us.
Allan, thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I wanted to start it out, Patty, by letting people know that you and I have worked together for many years in the past. We have a common mentor in your, sadly to say, your past uncle, Bob Darney. I like to pay respect to my mentors. And secondly, he gave you a pretty unique opportunity that you started very young in the mineral exploration business.
Yeah, he did. I've been in the business from an exploration standpoint, since I was 17 years old. And
Wow.
Bob had me working in an exploration camp up in northern British Columbia. I got to work in a 1 ton a day gold mine, and doing anything and everything that I was told to do and taught to do. And it gave me a fantastic grounding for having a future in the mineral exploration business.
Well, his legacy certainly carries on with guys like you and me, and it's been really important to what I do with my reporting on the sector as well.
Absolutely.
So, Patty, I remember the days when you were thinking about starting your own company, and you've been doing that for a while now, and you've done very good job of it. Let's
Thank you.
get a little into the history of how things evolved to become Orogen.
Sure. Well, I guess take us back to 2009. I was presented with an opportunity to take on a set of projects, assets, primarily based in Mexico, actually. Was where I first got started. And my historic perspective prior to that was working for sort of single asset focus projects and companies, drilling projects out to try to make a discovery. At the time, back in 2009, Evrim took on a different business model, that being a prospect generator. So we focused on moving those projects into partners' hands. Obviously, you're trying to minimize your risk, your upfront risk, and doing it on a multiple series of events where one of those projects will hopefully come into a discovery mode. You end up owning either a percentage of the project or a royalty, and that's what happened. So we did that for approximately 8-9 years, focused on project generation. We also moved into British Columbia at the time and up into the Northwest Territories. But in 2016, one of our partners, First Majestic, made a discovery on what's called the Ermatano deposit, now a mine, in Sonora, Mexico. And when we realized we had that type of asset, and it ended up being a royalty asset in the end for us, we used that asset as leverage, basically, to go find other assets that were similar to Ermatano. And through our efforts of our search, we found a company by the name of Renaissance Gold, and I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with that company. They were a prospect generator, just like Evrim was. And they too also had a discovery on what's called the Silicon project that they had sold to AngloGold Ashanti. And so at the time, it was very early days. We didn't really know exactly how big Silicon was going to be, but putting those two assets together, coupled by our prospect generation efforts, became a very compelling story. And so in the middle of the pandemic, we had discussions with the team at Renaissance and formally merged the companies in August of 2020.
So, Patty, going back to the 1990s, I remember one of the best performing gold stocks was a royalty company, Franco-Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
And they started out from humble beginnings. And it's testament to the fact that, if you do it right, royalty companies can be big winners for the investors.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from those days where Franco is today, they're around a $30 billion company, I believe, and have royalty assets, producing assets and streams all over the world. Very diversified, gold, copper. They're the biggest of the royalty companies.
And the other thing I wanted to point out to my audience is that a lot of royalty companies talk about organic growth through sort of that prospect generator model, but
Yes,
not many of them are successful in doing that. And if you are successful in doing that, it's really important because you don't have to go out there and buy something for 20 or 30 million dollars or more. You
yeah,
basically stake it, dress it up, bring in a partner, and they find something, and then you get a royalty. And you've done that successfully now with Orogen 2 times.
that's right.
In Sonora, you
Yeah,
have the Ermatano project,
that's right.
which is a series of epithermal veins
It's an epithermal target. Yeah,
that First Majestic found,
yeah.
put into production. It's now one of their best performing mines, and you guys have a 2% royalty on that. That's now, they're sending you some nice money.
Yes, yes, we're receiving on average approximately $1 million a quarter right now. So going to the business model, it is especially within the royalty space, organic royalty generation is quite unique. And you're right. Most royalty companies, the small ones, the big ones, go out and buy their assets. And our take is to generate the project from based on our data, based on our boots in the ground type of approach. We have very, very good geological teams throughout British Columbia, Nevada, Mexico. And these are the guys that are putting these project ideas together. And so our investment into each project is, I would say, fairly nominal. It's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, not the millions of dollars. The difference being is that it's a difficult business model to do because the probability, the odds of finding an economically viable deposit, as you know, are stacked against you. It's not an easy thing to do. But this I think points to the strength of our geological teams and the data that we have, the analysis that we employ, and then our business development group to actually put these projects in the hands of good quality partners. And so, yeah, you're right. It's a pretty rare event when this happens, and we've done it twice now. And we have 16 of these sort of active partnerships that are ongoing today from an option perspective or a project sale perspective, where our partners are working on the projects that we've generated. And
Now,
that's back. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to stick on Ermatano for a bit here, Patty,
Yeah.
because I live in Mexico, and a lot of big mines are made from epithermal veins.
Mm-hmm.
What's exciting about them is they have high grades and low costs, and that's a recipe for making a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
In Ermatano's case, they sort of started out by exploring where there was outcrops of the epithermal vein. And they originally started out with a resource that was kind of contained within about a 250-ish meters by a few hundred meters of depth. And when we were preparing for this show, you brought up the First Majestic presentation, and they've now expanded that quite dramatically to somewhere in the neighborhood of 750 meters that remains open. So this is an important factor for you guys for a couple of reasons. If you're just looking at the economic benefit to you on the smaller zone, that's one thing. Now it looks like you've got a much longer runway of royalties coming ahead.
Yeah, the strike length of Ermatano is definitely increased, and going back to the early days of prior to discovery, the initial work that was done at Ermatano, the top of the veins that we were working on returned values of, I think, 0.22 grams per ton gold. It's certainly not an easy thing to take to an investment committee to try to get budget to drill. But credit to the First Majestic guys, they actually went out and drilled one of these targets, and about 100 and some odd meters below surface, they hit the boiling zone. And I think it was 11 meters of 18 grams per ton gold. And so you're correct, from the initial sort of work that was done, there was a contained zone of approximately 250 meters, 300 meters on strike, and had various depths. Now they've moved that along through their expansionary drilling. They're outwards of 750 meters. Not all of it today is within the contained inferred resources, but I suspect that as time goes on, as First Majestic continues development of that mine, they will reach out and include those zones that haven't been included in the resource yet, and that'll come in time. They don't convert all the resources to reserves at once. It takes a number of years. So initial mine life is probably 7 years right now, but we anticipate that to be much longer than the 7 years that's been originally indicated.
Well, and if you look at the model that they have of that vein now with more extensive drilling, I think it's fair to say that that's not wishful thinking.
No, I think I think you're right, and they have their last presentation. They had a plan towards the end of 2022 of an expansionary 20,000 meters of drilling, and so they're looking for resources from within the underground workings, and also from surface within, I believe it's sort of a 5-kilometer radius around the mine as well. So as you say, these things just don't occur singularly. There's possible other ore shoots that they're going to find as time goes on. And we have 120 square kilometers of AOI with that 2% NSR. So it's a good situation for Orogen.
Well, and I not far from where I live in Zacatecas, Mexico, by the way, 10% of the silver that's ever been produced globally has come from epithermal veins in the state of Zacatecas. Around 40 kilometers from where I live is a cluster of epithermal veins that cover about a 1.5 kilometer strike length by about 1 kilometer of width. And inside of that is about 25 veins. And so that's pretty indicative of what you find is a cluster of these. And also interesting enough, you only go 1,000 meters away, and that's where Mag Silver found their blind veins at Juanicipio and Valdecanas, and now Mag Silver has turned into a cash machine with their mine. So these epithermal veins generally come in clusters, and
within districts too. Within the Rio Sonora Valley, you've got obviously Ermatano, but the nearby Santa Elena mine, which is also operated by First Majestic. You've got Mercedes mine, and you've got the new Las Chispas, which is the new Silvercrest. And so it's quite a developing camp, and so it's pretty exciting times.
Yeah, and Silvercrest is also on the verge of that second wave of the Lassonde curve. They went from tiny little junior, had that big exploration success. Their development discount window wasn't that severe, by the way, and it was a pretty challenging market during COVID and everything to bring a mine into production. But now they're at that second wave of the Lassonde curve, and I think they're going to do very well because finding low margin, high grade, high margin projects is usually what gets the premium.
Yeah. I mean, their grades are fantastic there, so I could see why it had a bit of a different trajectory.
$6.86 all in sustaining costs for their silver per ounce, and they're producing at 709 grams per ton of silver.
That's impressive.
Cash machine, my friend. So that was the sort of the launch pad, if you will, with Ermatano, 2% royalty. Now it's generating cash for you guys.
Yeah.
But you've got another very exciting project in Silicon, in Nevada.
Yeah.
Just to highlight the overview of it,
Sure.
Anglo has now put together a maiden resource of 3.4 million ounces of gold, and that's oxide gold. And to put that into context, Nevada's been picked over pretty cleanly for all the oxide deposits over the last 40 years. So having a big one is quite unique these days.
Yeah, yeah. It's well, that's a good segue into silicon. So to locate your listeners, we're in the Walker Lane, so you're sort of on the edge of the sort of Nevada California border. You're near Beatty, Nevada, and within what they call the Bullfrog District. The Bullfrog mine was a mine that was operated by Homestake for a number of years, approximately, I think, 2.8 million ounces. The land that where Silicon sits today was originally staked by the Renaissance team. I think it was back in 2014. Not a great time in the market. But nonetheless, these guys did a great job of picking up this project, and it took them a couple of years, but they put it in the hands of AngloGold Ashanti. And for that effort, they clipped a 1% NSR. AngloGold also made a payment of $2.5 million at the end of the term to them. So they actually did, I think, quite well on getting some cash up front. But since then, AngloGold has been very busy within the Silicon area and in what they call the Bear Mountain District. They have also acquired the lands that completely surround Silicon. That includes the lands that were once held by Corvus Gold and by Core Mining. They've invested over $600 million just in land acquisitions alone.
Wow.
And so I was on Silicon back in May of last year. They have 9 drill rigs turning at 2 locations. One is called the Central Silicon Zone, where the current 3.4 million ounce resource exists, and also on what's called Merlin. And so the scope and the scale of the activities that AngloGold is undertaking would indicate something that we believe is to be much larger than the 3.4 million ounces that's already been indicated. That 3.4 million ounces, again, maiden resource, inferred resources, had a fairly robust analysis done to it. There's been metallurgy done. It was done within, a pit shell. So it has a fair bit of robustness, if you will, to the resource. So it's not just, there was a lot of work.
Not like this, Patty.
It's not like that. Yes, it's not like that. Thank you. That's a good way to put it. So we are very bullish on the size potential of not only the Central Silicon. I was at a presentation back in November that was hosted by AngloGold Ashanti. They continue to chase the zone at depth. So they have not found the bottom of the gold system at Central Silicon. So they are planning to come out with a pre-feasibility study on the Central Silicon zone. We hope within the next month or so. AngloGold is going to come up with an update on that. And then also what they call a conceptual study at Merlin, which would sort of be an initial resource estimate there as well. So, it's hard to say exactly how big this is going to be yet. AngloGold talks about an annual production estimate of 300,000 ounces a year. We've heard their CEO say they've talked about 2 to 3 decades. So I don't know exactly, where Silicon fits into all that. But there is an idea that they have to put the mine in production. It starts with North Bullfrog. Our royalty doesn't exist on North Bullfrog, but they're going to put North Bullfrog into production somewhere around 2025, with Silicon coming into play somewhere around 2028. And again, we don't know exactly, how much, when, where, but it's 2028 seems to be the tipping point for us on this. And we're very excited. I think this is possibly going to be a new deposit model within Nevada. It's going to be something that could be sort of the next biggest or the biggest story that's happened in Nevada in many, many years. So we're very excited by it.
Well, and I think it's worth pointing out that, Patty, this isn't your first rodeo in that region. You and I worked for a company that was actually had the North Bullfrog project that then sold it to Corvus.
Yeah.
So you kind of know this area pretty well. And as you were describing that, and I was waving my arms, it reminded me of a lesson that Uncle Bob Darney taught me many years ago. And he said, when you look at a project, they always start out really big with a big geophysical anomaly or big geochemical anomaly Then when you put the truth machine to them, they get smaller. In the case of a mine, it's the opposite. You start out big, and usually as you put more science to it, it gets bigger. And this is leading me to a further question. With a maiden resource of 3.4 million ounces coming out of the gate, that's pretty impressive in its own right. But secondly, there's some reason to believe that as they go deeper, it could get even more exciting, because what you're looking at here is the oxide portion of a deposit. But when we did our conversation prior to this interview, you were talking about how it looks like maybe there's a network of epithermal veins below the oxide zone. And if you have such a widespread gold mineralization in the oxides, that speaks volumes about the potential below that in the epithermal veins.
Yes, there is. We saw some core photos of from about 625 meters below surface, and I believe that's outside of the existing resource. So I think there's an underground potential to this. Again, we don't have a lot of clarity on it. The one thing that AngloGold has not released is a lot of geological data, so it's been difficult to try to figure out exactly what's there. But if there is the potential for a mineralized zone to exist at depth below the oxide zone, and I think once you get down there, would you continue to open pit it? Would you go underground and chase it? Then that remains to be seen. But I do believe there is a strong potential for it, and so again, that just kind of further cements our view of the size potential of the camp.
So you've got, for a royalty company, a small royalty company, you've got the assets to grow into a much bigger royalty company now that you've got cash flowing from Ermatano and this 1% royalty on silicon.
Yep.
I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to your portfolio of partnerships, Patty, because I run a company called Advanced Lithium, and I was fortunate enough to have a 3% royalty on 3 projects in Kenya, and I wanted to be more focused in Mexico. And I approached you, and we were able to come to an agreement on the Sarape project, which is just to the north of Las Chispas of Silvercrests. And lately I've been doing a lot of homework to get ready for drilling, Patty. And I think you mentioned to me that the reason you guys originally grabbed Sarape is you thought it might be a Ermatano lookalike.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of projects within that Rio Sonora Valley that are sort of Ermatano analogs. The nice thing about Sarape is that you drive down the highway and you can see the vein structures sticking out and running for upwards of 6 kilometers. And there's I think tremendous potential on those veins, and our 2 partners that we had before.
See that, Patty?
I think there it is there.
That's you've got an outcrop, alteration, bunch of veins coming up. That's just one of many outcrops at Sarape.
Yeah, and so those are the types of things that you want to target. And our previous 2 partners on it, there's a lot of ground still to cover. And so I think you've got opportunity there to find, you can easily find another Ermatano type target there.
Well, and your previous partners, they were only explored about 200 meters of strike of a 5,000 meter strike vein. And what's got me excited lately, Patty, is the series of outcrops that are on this project. And then if you look at the Ermatano discovery model, there's only 2 points on that where they had it outcropping. And they drilled below that, and as you said, made the discovery at about 150 meters. So from my perspective, I'm planning to try to put together a program to drill underneath all of those outcropping veins to see if we can make a discovery.
That's we'd love to see those happen.
And you got a
we'd love another discovery.
And you've got a 1.5% royalty, so I'm hoping that in the future you're talking about us in glowing terms like you do Silicon and Ermatano.
Me too.
Okay, Patty. So in addition to those assets, you have a whole bunch more stuff on the go. Why don't you summarize that for us as well?
Yeah, I'll quickly kind of run through a couple things. I think the most notable one is just been making a fair bit of news in the market lately, and that's Headwater Gold. I don't know if you follow that group, but managed by a fellow named Caleb Stroop, very good guy, manages his company very well. They have the Spring Peak project, which we optioned to them about a year and a half ago. It's in Nevada, Walker Lane, epithermal target. They just on Monday announced some very nice drill holes that kind of follows up from their drilling that they did in late 2021. It is a bit of a new discovery, I would say. So early days. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but we're really, really excited by what the guys have turned up. Caleb brought in Newcrest Mining to help fund the program, so they are earning an interest in the project as well. But we have the ability to own up to a 1% NSR on Spring Peak, so we're really excited by these latest developments. So that's probably the most notable one. But we have 16 active, as I mentioned earlier, joint ventures, or I call them option agreements or project sales. I shouldn't call them just joint ventures because we don't participate in the funding. So these option agreements, we have them with Nevada Gold Mines, Barrick, Yamana, to name a few, and then a lot of juniors that are in behind that too, that have their own, and private companies too. Small little company right now called Ivy Minerals is out drilling in Nevada in the dead of winter, but they're doing it. And any one of and this is what I say to people, is that any one of these projects can be the winner. So when people say, which do you like the best? Well, I like them all for various reasons, because any one of them can be a winner. And case in point, Spring Peak didn't have a drill hole in it until last year, and now look where they are. And it's pretty exciting. So we have that 16 active option agreements in projects that are underway. We have 20 royalties as well. And so the royalties they're newer royalties, so they're not ones that have been sitting in portfolios for decades. These have been newly created, so they're fresh, they're being worked. And so last year we estimate that in excess of $70 million was spent in our royalty portfolio by our funding partner, or by our partners, or people who own the companies who own the projects. And so we expect at least that for 2023 as well.
And that was
Sorry, go ahead.
That was a tough year, 2022, for exploration, for about 6 to 8 months of it.
Yeah. So the projects that we have under option to companies, we expect somewhere between $7 to $10 million being spent this year. There's going to be probably at least 5 to 6 drilling campaigns that they are funding. And then on top of that, the royalty portfolio, that's a separate thing that'll get worked as well. But we expect a much greater amount of investment by the companies that own them. So
the model is, you guys are somewhat unique in that you use somewhat of the prospect generator model to organically grow your royalty portfolio. You've successfully done that at Ermatano, and it looks like that's what the future holds for Silicon. And you mitigate your risk, whereas explorers like me are throwing for the Hail Mary and going for all the gusto. You guys diversify out some of that risk, but still maintain an interest if there is success.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you make a discovery on Sarape, Al, I mean, the valuation that gets attributed to Sarape for you is going to be much greater than my 1.5% NSR. However, I get to do this a multiple amount of times. I mitigate my risk by not doing it just singularly. Today, Orogen has 16 opportunities to have a discovery made on one of its projects. And, proof of concept is that we have an additional 20 royalties that have been created from pre-existing partnerships.
Nothing wrong with those royalties kicking in cash to your bottom line, Patty. Why don't you talk a little bit about your bottom line, your cash
So in
position?
2023, 2022, our royalty revenue is expected to exceed $4 million. And on top of that, we've probably done about $1.5 million of project sales as well. So that's that gets factored in as income too. I think for 2023, we don't have full guidance yet from First Majestic, but we're expecting sort of 2,000 tons a day out of the mill where the Ermatano ore goes. That will translate somewhere, our guess is somewhere between 4.5 to upwards of $6 million of revenue. We expect possibly upwards of $2 million of our joint venture business. Every project that we sell, we try to make a profit on. So our prospect generation business is a self-supporting business unit as well. But we expect that we're going to make somewhere around 7 million to 8 million plus this year.
Well,
with net income of somewhere between sort of $2.3 to $3 million.
And you made a good point in our that you just brought up there about how you keep a big, good, strong team together. Is that you often get revenue from being the operator, or your team does a lot of the work.
Yeah. So in the historic perspective, we used to be sort of a all-encompassing kind of one-stop shop for geology. We did the project generation, we did all the work, we clipped management fees. It's difficult to do it all. And my team, the team that we've got at Orogen, they're fantastic geos, from Ignacio down in Mexico to Mark and Eli in Nevada, and then Lawrence and Mark Backness here in British Columbia. And Lawrence he runs the whole thing from a geological standpoint, and those guys are 100% focused on generating projects. And so as one goes out the door, they're back developing another one. And so that's the important key in all this. So it's having a very strong geological team, having strong mentors, having strong consultants. And like I said, we've done this a couple of times now, and these guys are really good. So that is sort of the core of the business. And without them, it'd be difficult to bring up the projects that we do. So they're very important to us. We don't do as I mentioned, we don't do once we sell it a project on or put it in the hands of a partner, we leave it up to them to explore it on their own, and except for certain circumstances. But by and large, we don't do the project operation under option.
Patty, you currently have an $89.6 million valuation, and in December, you had quite a significant breakout on your stock. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think part of it is that I think people are waking up to the fact that the royalty, that the business model that we've employed it works. There's a royalty space is exceptionally competitive, much more than I ever anticipated. But we have I just mentioned, a different business model. It works. We're profitable. We don't have any debt. And so, those things start to factor in. And I think that the big thing, though, is that silicon is starting to become more and more discussed and talked about and understood from just the sheer scale of how big this could possibly be. And if you look, I guess, as a comparison, AngloGold Ashanti has shot up almost 90% since the end of October. So, I think people are starting to look at that. They're starting to look at, what some of the royalty holders have in the camp, and it's starting to get reflected. So, it's a nice, it's nice to see a project being developed that you have an interest in, that you have no financial commitments to.
And that's a great point you brought up there, Patty, because sometimes when you do these kind of deals with major mining companies, they're not always, interested in getting the word out. But when a project like that can have such a big impact on the valuation of a very large company, it stands to reason that they're going to want to pump out as much information as they they can on the asset that you're partnered with.
Yeah, I think in time, for AngloGold Ashanti is going to be, they'll be championing the merits of the project, and they'll be talking about it more and more. I think to their credit, they had a bit of a windy path to get through to consolidate the camp, buying the land off Corvus, buying the land off Coeur. It's not easy to be talking about how excited you are about your project and trying to buy your neighbor's property off them. So, I can understand the difficulties that they might have had. And plus, I think for them trying to understand the sheer scale of what they've got from a geological model, and then to bring in all those different little deposits that either are with, surrounding silicon, or how they factor into the overall economics, it must be a huge job. So that's kind of coming to an end, I would suspect, and now they'll be able to talk about it more. And if you go to AngloGold's public disclosure and you listen to their conference calls, you can hear it, especially in the Q&A sessions. You can hear it. They're pretty excited guys. And
you tune into all of those, Patty. Was there any particular things that stand out to you from listening to their conversations?
Well, I don't, I have to be careful as to what I say, because, we're subject to 43-101. And so I can't say a whole lot, but I do believe that, the 3.4 million ounce resource that's been stated at Silicon is just the beginning. I think there's going to be something here much, much more significant. And, do encourage your listeners to, do their homework and listen to what they have to say, because there's certain things I can and can't say. And a lot of those things that are said by, AngloGold's leadership it's tough for me to say.
But maybe we could point them to something else they talked about, which is Merlin.
Yeah. So Merlin is a zone that was, I guess, discovered post Central Silicon. They started in the southern boundary of the project. And our AOI in that area is 79 square kilometers. So we have a substantial, royalty influence in the area. But with respect to Merlin, they started in the southern boundary, drilling off 200-meter centers, and they've now moved to the north 8 consecutive times. And so that gives you a sense of scale of what they're actually targeting. And as I mentioned, I was down there in May. We had just watched their 9th rig being put on site. And so it's a lot of drill rigs.
Well, and, they spent $600 million to consolidate the area. They got drills spinning like crazy. Sounds like they're pretty committed.
I would think so.
Patty, I'm going to wrap it up. Was there anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
No, I think we covered it off well, Al. We're very excited by the year ahead. We've got revenue. We don't have to go back to the market to raise money. We don't have any debt. So right now it's trying to get as much clarity on our key assets as we can, and try to generate more opportunities like that, so that we have a third sort of key pillar royalty in there that kind of supports the rest of the business.
Well, on that note, Patty, I'm going to wrap it up. And if you want, you can listen into my wrap up and we'll have a chat on the other end.
Sounds good, Allan. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Patty. So, I have been in the business since the 1990s, and I saw the success that was Franco-Nevada. But it's challenging for me to find good royalty companies to follow, because I find a lot of times that they're going out there and spending multi-millions, and then it really becomes a number crunching situation for me. Instead, I really like what Orogen is doing with that model of trying to organically grow their royalties. And that makes them very unique for me, and why they're the only royalty company that I've featured in my reports. And I don't foresee changing that. I think in Orogen Royalties, I've got a great royalty company to keep following. Another thing I really like is that they're always putting out news. The news flow from this company is excellent. So I'm looking forward to having future conversations with Patty. I really think that they are, a royalty company on the emerging into a cash flowing royalty company with a good group of assets that will take them to higher valuations. As always, my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to speak with your financial advisor before making any investment decision. And I'm a big proponent of doing your homework. And go to the Orogen's website and go to some other places that Patty recommended. And I think you'll understand the quality of the assets that they have. And I think you'll come up with your own argument why this is an undervalued situation. On that note, have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks,